From just two ships in 1960 to a fleet of 75 vessels today, BC Ferries is one of the world's largest ferry fleets in terms of size, boasting a workforce of some 4,500 employees. But the history of coastal shipping in these parts stretches back much further than that, long before BC Ferries was even a twinkle in Premier W.A.C. Bennett's eye, and even before the founding of British Columbia itself. Now that story, both good and bad, is being told in a new book. Here to talk about coastal connections, a history of British Columbia ferries and passenger ships, is author and historian Derek Hayes. When last we spoke in 2022, we were talking about your previous book, Incredible Crossings, the history and art of the bridges, tunnels, and inland ferries that connect British Columbia. Coastal Connections, very much a companion to that earlier book. What made you take the plunge this time and do a book just about ferries and passenger vessels?
Well, I mean, BC is so coastally oriented. It's the obvious sort of continuation. I touched on inland ferries, but the inland ferry system, whilst very important, is not anything like as extensive as the coastal one. So that's what came up. Plus, I got a call after the Incredible Crossings was published from a board member from BC Ferries, suggesting that I do a book on BC Ferries. So that sort of all came together, and here we are.
It seems like a natural fit. I can very much imagine this book in the coastal gift shop, or whatever they call it on board BC Ferries, pride of place with all the other local interest books.
Yes, I understand if it's not there already, it should be. They've already ordered it. So.
Right. As you say in the book, the nature of the BC coast has meant that ships of one sort or another have played an important role in the development of the province right from the beginning. When we talk about the beginning, it doesn't get much earlier than the HBC steamer, the Beaver, which I first learned about as a kid in elementary school. What role did the Beaver play in BC's early development?
Well, it was pivotal. I mean, it was the first steamship of any sort, the first powered ship to serve the BC coast, which meant it could come along in in any weather, even when the wind was blowing in the wrong direction. So that was critical to get things going. With the Hudson's Bay Company, of course, being very important in those days.
And the first regular, reliable passenger ferry service on the coast of BC was the Eliza Anderson in 1858, not coincidentally, just in time for the Fraser River Gold Rush. How important do you think the Eliza Anderson was for setting the stage for passenger ferries?
Well, it just happened to be the first. I mean, there are actually dozens of paddle steamers that companies sent up from San Francisco to basically transport people from San Francisco to the Gold Rush, and then of course they took them to Victoria typically, but then they needed to get from Victoria to the mainland, and so there's your ferries right there, you know.
That's the start right there. Fast forwarding to mid 20th century, before BC Ferries, much of the ferry traffic in this region was handled by the Blackball Ferry Line, which still exists in some form today. They operate the Coho between Victoria and Port Angeles. You write, Blackball truly changed the face of coastal British Columbia in the mere 10 years between 1951 and 61, opening up the Sunshine Coast and giving the public an easy way to get to Vancouver Island. I guess we can't overstate how important their contribution was to coastal transportation, because BC Ferries basically took it over and expanded upon it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, BC Ferries basically got going on the backs of Black Bull. The Black Bull was really the first company to develop the roll-on, roll-off concept that was basically exactly the same as we have today. Before that, companies like Canadian Pacific or Union Steamships, they went on a more sort of take your time and be elegant about it type model, and they had fine dining rooms, and there's some menus in the book that show you what the fine dining was, the calf's brains on toast and things like that. But it was really, people basically were getting much more car ownership for a start, but also they wanted to not spend the time getting from A to B. They wanted to get there as fast as possible, and they would forego the fine dining part of it in order to have the speed part of it.
So yeah, a move into a much more utilitarian sort of service. One thing that tickled me was sort of the growing pains with Blackball, in that it was proved to be a very popular service, especially for the Lower Mainland travelers, except for the folks in West Vancouver, because there was no upper levels yet. So if you're going to Horseshoe Bay, you're going right down Marine Drive, right through West Van, and that's one of the earliest examples of ferry traffic.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Marine Drive's pretty hair raising at the best of times, and it was not, you know, even more so then because they hadn't smoothed some of the bends out. But you can imagine all the ferry traffic going down just Marine Drive. But you know, Blackpool really did open up the Sunshine Coast. There was really no ferry from Horseshoe Bay to Gibson's across Howe Sound before that time. So it was very important, and of course that actually spurred the building of the first of the upper levels highway in 1958. Basically, is when that opened.
So we have them to thank for that. Exactly. We get to the creation of BC Ferries. Many people may not know or may have forgotten. It was created basically after a pair of strikes, Canadian Pacific's Coast Steamship Service and Blackball Ferries, effectively leaving Vancouver Island cut off from the mainland in the summer of 1958. And there's a legacy of that. What's that?
Well, BC Ferries, basically. W.A.C. Bennett, the premier at the time, was basically got fed up with the unions and said, "To hell with it, I'm going to do it myself." And that's exactly what he did. And he told his Minister of Highways, who was Phil Gagliardi, Flying Phil, who was well known for getting the job done when it came to building roads. He gave him the job of setting up the ferry service. And one of the stories that I like is the fact that Gagliardi looked at a map and said, "Okay, we want to go from there to there as the shortest distance," and he picked the site of Tsawwassen. And of course, Tsawwassen has had or has no natural harbors at all, right? So they basically gave the engineers a hair-raising job of trying to create a harbor on quite a coast which is not, has a lot of weather attached to it, and is. So they did this modeling out at UBC and against what you might think, came up with the idea that a very flat surface would be best, rather than sort of building a harbor with sort of vertical brick walls, that you should have this finely sloped sediment built, and that would withstand the waves that you got in that area much better than a straight brick wall sort of thing. So, and that's what he did. And he said, despite they tested it, they expected it to not withstand the waves, but it did, and it's still there today, as we know.
And of course, BC Ferries going from 2 vessels to 75 today, taking over a number of routes, starting up others. You make the very keen observation that, quote, BC Ferries seems to have consistently underestimated the popularity of its ships, a feature some would argue continues to this day. I think we feel that every time there's a long weekend in this province.
Yes, well, it is. I mean, the trying to get reservations sometimes is bad. I mean, you used to be able to just go to the ferry and get on, and no problem at all. And now, of course, if you don't have a reservation, you're taking a chance, particularly on a weekend or something like that. They have consistently, it seems, underestimated the demand. And their latest thing for this, wanting to order these 5 ships from China, being reduced to 4 ships. Is probably, in my opinion, a mistake, because the growth is demonstrably there, and it's BC's going to do nothing but grow. So I don't think just having the 4 is a good idea. Having one in reserve, basically, which is what the 5th one was, is a good idea, because as you know, they're prone to breakdowns, and that really puts a spanner in the works, so to speak.
When we move into the modern era, we were not without controversy. The current iteration of the Ferry Corporation is actually called BC Ferry Services Incorporated, and that's a direct result, of course, of the Fast Ferries fiasco of the 1990s, which I'm old enough to remember. What do you remember the most about that era, about that time?
Oh, I remember being very pleased to go on a fast ferry. I took a ferry from Horseshoe Bay to Nanaimo on one of the fast ferries when they first came out. I thought they were super duper. I didn't see anything wrong with them at all. But apparently, people complained about just about everything. And then there was this big thing about the amount of wash that they created, although. Of course, if you go fast, you're going to create more wash. What do you expect? And these ferries were designed by an Australian naval architect who had done that before in Australia, and had designed perfectly successful catamaran fast ferries. And it's a bit of a mystery as to why it didn't work in British Columbia. But the amount of political stuff behind it is definitely what caused the government, the NDP government of Glenn Clark at the time, then collapsed or gave up in 2000, year 2000, and then Gordon Campbell came in, and in 2003 he just decided to get rid of the problem entirely and sold them off for a fraction of what they had cost to build. And it's a shame that happened, but that's the way it goes. That's politics. But that led to the creation of BC Ferries as a quasi-independent body in 2003 with the Coastal Ferries Act.
Now, one thing I didn't know, and I may have this wrong, but you point out in the book that the fast ferries end up showing up on Facebook Marketplace, of all things.
Yeah,
that was a revelation to me.
Yeah,
well, underreported.
Was to me too. There they are. I took the illustration, put it in the book. In Abu Dhabi, they were advertised for sale in Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace of all things. I guess lots of very weird things get sold on Facebook Marketplace these days.
Quite the ignominious end for something that started out so positively and with such fanfare. We were talking about this just a moment ago, but these days BC Ferries back in the news, even in the corridors of power in Ottawa for this agreement to build 4 major vessels at a Chinese government-owned shipyard. What do you think of that move, and what do you think of the economics that we can't build these ships domestically anymore?
Yeah, well, it's unfortunately true. The reality is that the Chinese shipyard that had got the contract is very large, and it has enormous economies of scale that are just not available pretty well anywhere else in the world. I mean, you may notice that as soon as BC Ferries became independent in 2003, the very first order for new ships, the coastal ones, went to Germany to get that, and then Poland, and then Romania. All places that either had larger shipyards or had a cheaper workforce. And those two things in combination are pretty hard to beat. So it's sure it's controversial that it went to China, and very unfortunate for BC. But it's hard to see. Like, would taxpayers like to pay 2 or 3 times more than they did or will for the Chinese ones? I don't think so, and that's reality. I mean, we all buy things from China. Let's face it, everything you buy almost is from China these days.
As I mentioned off the top, the book covers both the good and the bad of the coastal connections in this region. We had the collision in 1970 between a BC ferry and a Russian freighter, and of course the greatest marine tragedy for BC ferries would be the sinking of the Queen of the North, which you go into exhaustive detail here. And I guess it kind of shows that as reliable as ferry travel is, it does come with some risk.
Well, of course. I mean, you fly in a plane, or you take a ship, or drive down the road, or walk down the road. I mean, the reality is there's a risk in everything. It's just a matter of. I mean, BC Ferry's safety record is pretty good. I mean, I don't think anybody can challenge that. But of course, when you get something spectacular happening, like a sinking of a ship, that's obviously going to lead to a lot of questioning.
What do you hope people get out of the book?
Well, just a better understanding of the way BC works, I suppose, on the coast with its ferry system, how interconnected it is, and how hard it is to run, and how hard it is to keep it on track, and perhaps have a little bit more sympathy for BC ferries next time a ferry is cancelled because of mechanical failure.
I think the strength of the book is how it's laid out. The story is laid out in such a way that I've heard bits and pieces of this over the years, but I've never seen it explained so well from front to back. And of course, there's also your characteristic wit with your writing, but of course, you have a great love of how these things look. Getting back to the art of BC Ferries, and there's some wonderful photography in there from yourself in particular that I think bears special mention. How does it feel to express yourself that way on top of writing the history?
Well, it's all part of the creative process, I guess. I mean, I'm really writing books for fun these days, and it's taking photo. I mean, I've been a photographer since I was old enough to walk pretty well. There's a picture of me with a Brock's brownie when I was about 5. But that's my hobby is photography. So being able to find a vehicle to get some of my work out is very satisfying.
I think that joy definitely comes across in the book, sir.
Well, thank you.
The name of the book is Coastal Connections, A History of British Columbia Ferries and Passenger Ships. It's available from Harbor Publishing. My thanks to author Derek Hayes.
Thank you, John. Thanks for taking an interest.